Welcome to the Peace Leader Training Step 3 workshop on 3 levels of development. You know, Jesus showed us how to have compassion and justice for people that are in need, but he also taught us how not to just leave them there. He taught us, first of all, in Matthew chapter 25, starting in verse 35, "For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit." And we see how valuable and important this is, and it's given to us as a personal responsibility that we need to respond, or our faith really isn't his faith. And it says he'll separate the sheep from the goats, not based on these works, but based on the fruit of our faith. And so he shows us that we're to respond. But then we see later on the Apostle Paul talking about maybe some different ways that we can respond. In Galatians chapter 6, in verse 2 and verses 4 through 5, it says this: "Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ." And then in verse 4, "Each one should test their own actions. Then they take pride in themselves alone without comparing themselves to someone else, for each one should carry their own load." You know, this kind of creates a little bit of a dilemma when it says each person should carry others' burdens. And then in verse 5, it says, each one should carry their own load. What's that mean? Well, first of all, in verse 2, when it says you should carry each other's burdens, this means weighted down, heavy. I can't do it for myself. And in peace, we call that relief. It's something they can't do for themselves. It's somebody who is in such terrible shape, they can't even take care of themselves. And that's relief. But then Paul goes on and explains later on that each one should carry their own load. And that word load means something like a light backpack, something that everyone's able to carry. Everybody has some problems. They have needs, and they should learn how to carry their own load. So we want to distinguish between those and begin to understand how to help people move from their problems to being lives that are fully transformed. What I want to cover is the framework of transformation. How do you look at a community and begin to see the opportunity to bring transformation? Pastor Rick gave us PEACE. Sometimes I wonder whether, in his own way of being genius, that he knew all that this could do to help us, or whether that was, that happened to work out that way, but it's really quite genius. And so when you begin to look at how you approach a community, you do need a construct. You can't just say, we're going to do everything in the community, or we're only going to do a couple things. But as he looked at the evil giants, what are the problems we're trying to address? Then he came up with the construct of how Jesus modeled the solution to those problems. And he called it PEACE. So first thing is, if this is a community, and we'll call it Community X. We talked about how to enter into the community, but then how do you actually begin to develop your strategy in the community? And we develop it around PEACE. Now, the simplest way to be able to look at this is I like to start with the last E, because one of the most common ways to think about developing people is our education system. And around the world, people typically use a similar education system, especially when it comes to primary school. So when you think about it, we have a primary level of education, a secondary level, and a tertiary level. So this diagram's about PEACE, 1, 2, 3. In education, in primary level education, over here, what is it that you're trying to get done with children by the time they finish primary school? What do you want them to be able to do? Read, write, and arithmetic. Okay? In the development world, that's called literacy. Now, this messed me up as a kid because they told me I had to learn the 3 R's. Reading, writing, and arithmetic, the 3 R's. I'm like, I may not be that smart of a kid, but those don't start with 3 R's. Okay. Now here's the beauty of this. If this is your church in a community, and you have a church health process that's sending 100% into the community, and there's people who are not literate for whatever reason, we talked about root causes, for whatever reason they're not literate, and you have people from the church who have a heart for those people and want to help them with literacy. For example, maybe they're from another country and they can't speak English. They can't read it, they can't write it. Those are 2 problems. They want to come out here. You want them to be able to become literate. Now, if your primary source of manpower are church members, which is our model, as you're mobilizing people toward this need, and they're going to take a crawl step, what % of people that are in the church could go out here and help people become literate if they had a passion for it? What % could do that? 100%. And how much would it cost to do it? It can be as low as 0. Now you have something where you have a way to take as many people as are interested that don't need money, they just need time and a talent to come out and start teaching people in literacy. Now, is that all they need in life? No, but that's a foundation. That's a foundation for all the rest of education. Can you read? Can you write? Can you do basic math? Now you have some of the skills to teach yourself a lot more through life. It's foundational. Now, a secondary school, a little bit different. You start to learn other skills. There are life skills. There's college prep. That takes a greater expertise. It takes more curriculum, takes more money. So this is not infinitely sustainable without outside resources. Then you go to tertiary level, you're up here at colleges, universities. It requires professors, usually a lot of equipment, very expensive. Would you agree? Very expensive. If the church is asked, can you come and start a secondary school? Can you start a tertiary level institution? That's a bit of a challenge. Not a lot of people can serve, and it takes a lot of money to keep it going. But at this level, you can reach the masses with as many trainers as you have at virtually no cost. Okay, so that's one letter. Let's go to care for the sick. So when I went out as a medical missionary, within 3 months of being out in the community, we discovered that instead of doing clinical work, 70 to 80% of the diseases were preventable. Doesn't take a lot of intelligence to go, maybe we should be spending time preventing these, okay? So this primary level is primary and preventive health care. We went to churches, trained the church members in preventive and primary health care, and guess what? Over time, what happens? In the community, what happens to disease? A lot of those preventable things start going away. All right, now we often get asked, can you start a clinic? Which requires a healthcare worker in medicine. Can you start a hospital? That requires doctors, equipment, very expensive. Where can the church mobilize the greatest number of people? Here. What's the cost of doing preventive and primary health care? Essentially zero. Okay? If you look at a community in this level of development, where this is weakest, when this is not fully developed as a foundation, you have a developing community. It's an underdeveloped community. Where this is greatly developed and has a strong foundation, you're looking at a developed community. It doesn't mean that there aren't still needs at this level, but it's a fairly developed community. When you go to assist the poor, again, the big question in addressing poverty when you're getting to root causes is what's causing the poverty. But the majority of the time, it's not about providing the poor with money or with resources. That's not the best way to approach something called extreme poverty. We look at three kinds of poverty: extreme poverty, moderate poverty, and relative poverty. So every country has relative poverty, but extreme poverty may be making less than $2 a day. Not a lot of people can afford to help these people that are at extreme poverty. What Muhammad Yunus found when he got the Nobel Prize for working with the extreme poor was people thought he got the Nobel Prize for providing 1 million loans. By the way, he's a Muslim who is from Bangladesh and was doing this in Bangladesh. But the secret behind that wasn't the 1 million loans, it was the savings groups below that. The savings groups below that goes to the poor and with dignity says, hey, we want to come along and serve you, and we want to help you to be able to do these groups among yourselves. By the way, 80% of people in savings groups around the world are women. They tend to do better at both saving and knowing how to use it. And the savings groups, the only money that goes into the savings group are their own savings. You have to think of it in light of pennies. Pennies. So these savings groups, actually the concept of these savings groups goes back 1,200 years to China. This is how in their communities they used to address poverty, was they would get people together from the community and they would start to save together. Now they keep track of each of their own savings, and the first time they save, they usually just take the amount that they've saved and go, now what can I do with this that can grow my personal economy? Most have never had even that much money. So you can imagine if somebody walked in and said, well, forget all this saving stuff, I'm just going to give you $50, which to us is nothing. And they've been saving pennies. And they're learning how to save, they're learning how to count, they're learning all these things. Well, they don't know what to do with $50. It's like when somebody wins the lottery. You've seen the research on people who win the lottery? Yeah, it doesn't go too well. So they're learning how to save. Now, oftentimes with these people, when they have savings, the first thing that when they have a savings that they use it for, can you guess what they use it for if they're untrained? What do you think they would do with their savings? Now, this is pennies. They just have been saving, maybe they made it to $4 after saving a couple months. What would they use it for? So not usually food, they usually have some sort of food supply. They grow their own food. Here's what often happens. Their kids are sick. They have to spend all their money on that. Now here's what's happening. The people from the church who've been helping do this, so there's some people have a passion for education, some people have a passion for health, some people have a passion for poverty, but these are the same families. They're the same families. When they see them starting to spend on this, if they haven't had this training yet, they make sure they bring the training so that the kids aren't getting sick as often. So we're working in one particular slum in an unchurched population, and it started with this. That was where the strategy started. Members were coming in and helping them with this. Then they realized they're not really able to count their money. They're not literate, right? You don't go to the bank and give them pennies. So they keep it in a double lock safe or lock box. And so they began to teach them literacy. Then they realized they were using their savings on their kids who were sick, so they started teaching them this. So this group of families turn around and ask them, why are you doing this? Non-Christian, why are you doing this? So what do you think the church members said? Why are you doing this? So they had some training from us, and they were very clever. So when they asked, why are you doing this? They said, you don't want to know. So people go, no, we do want to know. No, you don't want to know. No, we want to know. It's about spiritual things. You don't want to know. No, we want to know. Why are you doing this? It's about Jesus. So you don't want to know. I want to know. I want to know about Jesus. So suddenly you have a group of people who are saying, tell me about Jesus, and some of them become Jesus followers. They've committed their life to Jesus. And guess what that is? When you form a new group of people who are followers of Jesus, what do you call that? A church plant. So they've helped them know Jesus and start a group. Now, this group doesn't meet as a savings group. We don't mix those things because some people don't want to be in this if they're in this. Sometimes they all might. But they go this. Now, this is happening. Who should lead this group over time? Somebody from that group, not somebody from here. This is a different community. It's in a larger community, but this was in a slum. So these people who think they don't know anything, don't have anything, say, I couldn't lead it, and they go, we will teach you, equip servant leaders, we will teach you how to lead a group. So now they're leading their group. Now let me come back here for just a second. There are other levels of economic development. These are microfinance institutes where they can build up to get loans. This is more in the area of job creation or wealth creation. Same thing with leadership development. You see in your notes different levels of leadership development, different kinds of church planting. These are all good. Different kinds of developing leaders, Bible schools, seminaries, all those, great. Churches, you got everything from a church plant that's got a building to a church plant that's renting a facility to a house group. All good, amen? All good. This is the simplest, most reproducible and sustainable way to do it. That can involve as many members as want to. It's not about your skill set, it's not about your money, it's your availability. You learn how to do this. Now, here's the fun thing. When you look at this, these are sustainable and reproducible. But what else is it? Holistic. You are caring about these parts of their lives. Now, these are big buckets. There's a lot of needs that can fit into all of these, but you're getting started with some very core needs in a person and a family's life. And guess what? They're now in biblical community. So what happens in biblical community is these needs are being met, but now they're in biblical community to get all their relationships growing. The relationship with God, with others, with self, with culture. These are being developed in biblical community. Sometimes this doesn't get planted because they're enough geographically close and culturally where this becomes their biblical community. That can happen. But in this case, that's what happened. Now, you will have people that come along and say, I really want to serve at a different level. I want to help with the Microfinance Institute. I want to help in a clinic or a hospital, in a high school or a college. There's a lot of these other areas where people can help. I want to plant a church at this level where there's a seminary-trained pastor where there's a pastor and a building. It may be where we're renting a building and it's a part-time pastor. People might want to serve in these other areas. Great. But that's not going to be the majority of your people, and requires more training and more resources to participate here. If your church says we're going to fund the planting of a church with a senior pastor and a building, that's a major financial commitment. So you either have to say, when we get to looking at resources, we're capitalizing something. That's one way to use resources. We're capitalizing something because this will become self-sustaining over time. So you're making a commitment for X number of years till it becomes self-sustaining. If you have a strategy like a hospital, which almost none of them become self-sustaining financially. In theory they will, but not usually. Like a university, in theory they do, but not really. It's why every student needs to go get major loans from a government. If you're participating in that, then in this area, to keep it sustainable, you need to collaborate. So when people ask us, I think I spelled that wrong. When people ask us, will you participate with us in one of these levels, the question we have for a local church that's asking us to collaborate here is, who's going to sustain it? And usually the answer for us has been, well, you. And our answer is, we're not ready to commit to ongoing funding of the hospital, the school. It might be something like in Assist the Poor, it could be a trade school, something like that, vocational school, seminary. You have to collaborate to be able to do that. You have to know who the collaborative partners are in order to do that. Okay. We also talk about, in this construct, a level of involvement. I'm going to say 0. It's not because 0 means not important or not of value. It just starts before development, and I'm going to call it acts of kindness. Acts of kindness. So in Matthew 25, we see we're giving people that are in need of food, providing water, visiting the person in prison, caring for the alien is biblical. But you don't see in that passage of Scripture that you're now journeying, you're living incarnationally with the prisoner or with the poor or whatever. It's just doing the act of kindness. Great. We do that. We encourage our members to do that. That's part of personal peace. We also have something called the Peace Center that attracts people to come to our church to get these resources. It's a good thing. It's a biblical thing. What you can do with the acts of kindness is say, as you connect with people, you can begin to get them on a journey of development. Do they need to be here in development? What part of their life is undeveloped? And move them into a developmental process. Okay? So again, acts of kindness, biblical. We encourage people to do it. But then we also ask the question of ourselves, is that the best that we can do? So don't stop doing it. But now the people that are coming and receiving this benefit, can you start to journey with them, discover root causes, and begin to address the root causes toward helping the person get out of poverty, get out of ongoing sickness, be able to, because they're literate, get better jobs, all that. There's another level, I'm going to call it level 4, I'm going to put it up here, which is relief. Relief. So relief is really meant to rescue. Is there a disaster? Is there a problem that's resulting in a person, if they don't get help right now, they could die? When you step into this world, you need to be resourced from the beginning to be able to go in to provide shelter, food, water, medicine, not just for yourself as going in, but for other people, especially as first responders, is to say we need to help them stabilize, get rescued, get taken care of for now, and then get into a rehabilitation process. How do we now get our lives back? This takes a lot of resources, and as first responders, it does take expertise. Not everybody is going to be a first responder. They might go later and do other things like clean up houses or do trauma counseling, stuff like that. So we don't ignore relief. It's very much part of our peace construct, but we view it as that part of peace which is not just common day-to-day work in the community. So if we had fires in our community, we would respond through a team of people that's their passion, that's their specialty. We've got training ahead of time, resources ahead of time that they can go in and work on that. Now, I lived in a country where there was a civil war that broke out. That was first when I lived there. And relief kept coming in for month after month, to where it started affecting the economy because people were no longer buying their medical supplies and food and all these things because they were being provided from the outside, and their economy suffered. So when the second disaster happened, where there was a tsunami, the government said, relief agencies, we love you, please come, you got 30 days. And the only people that can access your resources are those who've been affected, so we're going to monitor who gets this help. It went great. It didn't affect the economy. You'll see countries that just keep the doors open for relief. They have chronic poverty, which is not a relief situation, and their doors are open for container after container after container after container of clothes and shoes and food and medicine and on and on and on and on. And the whole country is trying to take advantage of it. And guess what it does to the economy? It collapses the economy. It's filled with corruption because it's all about resources coming in with very little control over it. And you get the picture. Okay, so I want you to think this way. We talked about entering a community and you're looking for the gaps, right? You're looking for, there's some things being done. Most things are up here, some things are down here, and you're going to find the gaps. There are maybe a certain group of people, not everybody, that can't access it. There's some who've been left behind. There's some that, in terms of poverty, there's something called generational poverty that's not relief. Generational poverty, where they just think they can't. I mean, there's deeper issues than that, but you're going to be working at this level. You have the issue of gangs, like in our community, gangs, where we started working in collaboration with the DA's office, the police department, the schools, because if you can get to the junior high kids and you start helping them get to school, start tutoring them, we actually offered to those children, if you show up for school this many times and your grades get to this level, we'll give you a turkey dinner for Thanksgiving. A little bribe action. But we knew that the turkey dinners would be provided for free by some of the grocery stores around here. So a lot of these students had never ever had a Thanksgiving dinner, especially a turkey one. So we had volunteers that came and made sure they were coming to class, after school tutoring, and the ones that hit it, which was most of them, teachers were amazed that for a turkey dinner they'd show up for school and do better in class. And the police went with our people to go knock on the door of the home. Now, when you knock on the door in these homes, most of the situations, When they see a policeman, they're freaking out because that's never been good. And so guess who gets to carry the turkey dinner? The police. And you're like, can we talk to your junior high child? And they're like, what did you do wrong? No, not at all. Have him come, have the parents come. They present the turkey dinner to the parents and go, it's because your son, your daughter did so well in class and showed up. This is your gift, reward for that. The parents are crying, the cops are crying. There's a city south of here, San Clemente now, a couple years later, there's no more gangs, according to the police, in San Clemente. They left. There was no more youngsters to recruit. So there's ways that we collaborate, recognizing that there's problems at this level that we're trying to get done, and some of it moves up into these areas and we collaborate with other people. Okay? So there's a picture. It's helpful for your members to see. You look at your area that you're going to be working. It wouldn't be a whole city, a particular community, and you can have 4 or 5 of these communities. There are 4 or 5 different pictures and say, okay, here's the basic idea. Where are we going to start? We've done the research, we've been in the community, we found people of peace, we're building relationships. Where do we want to go from here? What are the root causes? And we want to do that. By the way, this is very interesting because we usually don't think about getting to spiritual root causes. We just need to preach the gospel. Well, you know, here in North America, the gospel's been available. So what is it? What's the root cause that they don't want to show up at a church? They don't want to hear. So you can dive into root causes there also, okay? Because it makes it a lot easier to be able to have people willingly and purposely asking for you to talk to them about Jesus. All right? Get it? Good. All right.